The radio transmission at 0342 hours changed everything. They have the colonel. Repeat, hostile forces have captured Colonel Hayes. Then gunfire, Arabic shouting, silence. Captain Nora Hill stared at the dead radio, her mind calculating what everyone feared to say. The battalion commander had been taken by enemies who specialized in brutal executions filmed for propaganda. Standard response: assemble a rescue force, plan for hours, coordinate with command, by which time Hayes would be dead. Nora looked at the tactical map showing the hostile compound 15 kilometers away, thought about the colonel who'd mentored her for 3 years, grabbed her rifle and every magazine she owned, and walked out without asking permission. Because sometimes you had to go alone into darkness and remind the enemy that taking an American hostage was the last mistake they'd ever make. 3 years earlier, when Nora Hill had first met Colonel Marcus Hayes, she'd been a lieutenant fresh out of Ranger School, trying to prove she belonged in a combat arms unit that didn't think women could hack it. Hayes had been her battalion commander, a 30-year veteran with 2 combat deployments and the kind of quiet competence that made better officers out of everyone around him. Their first conversation had been brief and direct. Lieutenant Hill, I don't care if you're male, female, or Martian. I care if you can lead soldiers in combat. Can you? Yes, sir. Then prove it. Every day, some people in this battalion don't think you belong here. Make them wrong. She had. For 3 years, Nora had led her platoon through 2 deployments, earned the respect of soldiers who'd started out doubting her, and proven that gender didn't matter when bullets were flying and decisions needed to be made. Hayes had been there every step, mentoring her, challenging her, making her better. Now he was being held hostage by an enemy force that would torture him for intelligence, film his execution for propaganda, and dump his body in a desert where it might never be found. The secure facility in northern Syria was technically an observation post, a small American presence monitoring ISIS remnants and preventing their resurgence. In reality, it was a staging point for operations that officially didn't exist, run by people whose names appeared in classified files that even most generals couldn't access. Nora had been serving as the site's operations officer, coordinating intelligence gathering, managing assets, doing the kind of staff work that competent officers did between combat deployments. Hayes had flown in for a routine inspection, bringing his security detail and plans to spend 48 hours reviewing operations. The ambush had happened during his return convoy. Professional, coordinated, executed with the kind of precision that suggested someone had leaked the route and timing. The security detail had fought well. Nora had monitored the radio traffic, heard the controlled voices calling out contacts and coordinating fire. But they'd been outnumbered and outmaneuvered, and when the shooting stopped, Hayes was gone. The site commander, a major who specialized in intelligence analysis but had never led troops in direct combat, had immediately begun the standard hostage recovery protocol. Contact higher headquarters, assemble available forces, develop courses of action, request support from special operations units with hostage rescue expertise, all by the book, all necessary, all taking time that Hayes didn't have. Nora had studied the situation with the cold clarity that came from years of training. The enemy had taken Hayes to a compound in a village 15 kilometers northeast. Her intelligence network had identified the location within an hour of his capture. The compound was fortified, guarded by an estimated 20 fighters, surrounded by a population that was either sympathetic to the enemy or too terrified to provide information. A conventional rescue operation would require significant force, careful planning, and hours of preparation. By which time, Hayes would likely be dead, and his body would be on display in an ISIS propaganda video. The site commander had looked at the same intelligence and reached the obvious conclusion: we need to wait for special operations assets. This is beyond our capability. Nora had looked at the same intelligence and reached a different conclusion. 15 kilometers was close enough to reach before dawn. 20 fighters could be eliminated with proper planning and aggressive execution, and beyond our capability really meant beyond what conventional forces typically attempt. But Nora Hill hadn't spent 3 years earning a Ranger tab and proving herself in combat units just to sit in an operations center while someone she respected was tortured and killed. She'd left the command post at 0400 hours. Not officially, not with authorization, just grabbed her personal weapon, an M4 carbine that she'd customized over years of service, loaded 6 magazines with 210 rounds total, grabbed her night vision equipment and combat medical kit, and walked to the motor pool. The gate guard had started to question her. "Ma'am, I don't have you on the movement log." "Emergency supply run to Outpost Delta," Nora had lied smoothly. "Just got the call. I'll be back before morning formation." The guard had hesitated, then waved her through. Young enlisted soldiers didn't typically question captains who walked with purpose and spoke with confidence. That hesitation, that assumption that officers knew what they were doing, bought her the 10-minute head start she needed. She'd taken an unmarked pickup truck, standard civilian pattern, nothing that advertised American military, and driven northeast through territory that ranged from probably hostile to definitely wants you dead. The night vision equipment turned the Syrian landscape into a green-tinted maze of roads, villages, and empty desert. Nora had driven with her rifle across her lap, windows down despite the cold, listening for sounds of other vehicles or movement that might indicate enemy presence. She'd operated in this region long enough to know the patterns, where the roads were safe, where they weren't, which villages to avoid, which could be transited quickly without drawing attention. The drive took 40 minutes, covering terrain that would have required hours of tactical movement on foot. She'd parked the truck 2 kilometers from the target compound, hidden it behind a low ridge, and continued on foot through darkness that was absolute away from her night vision. 2 kilometers of careful movement, checking every shadow, every sound, moving with the patience that separated soldiers who survived from soldiers who died in places like this. She'd reached an overwatch position on a small rise 300 meters from the compound, just as dawn was beginning to paint the eastern sky with the first hints of gray. Through her binoculars, Nora studied the target compound. Traditional Syrian construction, mud brick walls surrounding a central courtyard, single-story buildings, flat roofs that provided defensive positions. She counted 6 guards visible on the walls, estimated at least that many more inside. Vehicles in the courtyard, 2 technicals with heavy machine guns mounted in the beds, and in the courtyard, visible through a window in the main building, she could see a figure that her gut said was Hayes, hands bound, guarded by 2 fighters with AK-47s. The tactical situation was clear and brutal. She was one person against at least 20 enemies in a fortified position. Conventional military wisdom said this was suicide. Special operations doctrine said you needed a team, support, coordination. Nora looked at the compound, thought about Hayes, and decided that sometimes conventional wisdom and doctrine could go fuck themselves. She spent the next 30 minutes planning her assault with the methodical precision that Ranger School had drilled into her. Identify key targets, the guards on the walls, the technical gunners, anyone who looked like leadership. Develop a sequence of engagement, who to shoot first, second, third. Plan movement routes, where to approach, where to take cover, how to breach the compound. The plan was simple, violent, and gave her maybe a 30% chance of surviving. But it gave Hayes a 90% chance of getting out alive, and that was the math that mattered. Nora checked her rifle one final time. 210 rounds across 6 magazines. Not enough for a sustained firefight, but enough if she made every shot count. Her hands were steady, her breathing was controlled, and her mind had achieved that peculiar calm that came when you'd accepted that you were probably going to die, but were going to make it count. She keyed her radio, a small unit that probably wouldn't reach the operations center, but might be picked up by monitoring stations. "This is Captain Hill. I am conducting solo direct action on hostile compound at grid reference November. Victor 478321. Multiple hostiles, attempting hostage extraction. If you're monitoring this net, send support. If not, tell my family I went down swinging. Hill out." Then she turned off the radio, left it behind the ridge where it might be recovered later, and began her approach to the compound. The first guard died without knowing he'd been targeted. Nora shot him from 200 meters, a single suppressed round that dropped him from the wall in a crumpled heap. The second guard turned to investigate, confused by his partner's collapse. She shot him too, shifting targets with practiced speed. 2 down, 18 to go. She moved closer, using a dry irrigation ditch for concealment, her rifle up and ready. A third guard appeared on the wall, scanning the area with growing concern. Nora settled behind cover, controlled her breathing, and fired. The guard dropped. 3 down, 17 to go. The compound was starting to react. Shouts from inside, fighters moving toward the walls. Someone had realized they were under attack, even if they didn't know from where or by whom. Nora reached the compound wall and placed a small breaching charge. Thermite composition that would burn through the mud brick without the explosive blast of traditional breaching charges. She moved to a position of cover, detonated the charge, and waited through the 10 seconds of burning before the wall had a hole large enough to enter. She went through fast and hard, her rifle tracking for targets. The courtyard was chaos, fighters running, grabbing weapons, trying to organize a defense against an attack they didn't understand. Nora shot the first 3 she saw, controlled pairs center mass, dropping them before they could return fire. 6 down, 14 to go. A Technicals machine gun opened up, tracer rounds tracking toward her position. Nora rolled behind a vehicle as rounds tore through the air where she'd been standing. She came up on the vehicle's opposite side, acquired the gunner, and fired 3 times. The gunner slumped over his weapon. 7 down, 13 to go. 2 fighters appeared from a doorway, weapons raised. Nora engaged the first, dropped him, shifted to the second. Her rifle clicked empty, the first magazine exhausted. She executed a tactical reload, the empty mag dropping as she seated a fresh one, her movements so practiced they happened without conscious thought. She engaged the second fighter, who was trying to take cover, and dropped him with 2 shots to the torso. 9 down, 11 to go. She moved toward the main building where she'd seen Hayes, staying low, using vehicles and walls for cover. Rounds cracked past her head, sparked off the ground near her feet. The enemy was starting to coordinate, starting to understand that there was a single attacker moving through their compound with deadly purpose. A fighter appeared on a rooftop with an RPG. Nora saw the threat, pivoted, and shot him before he could fire. The RPG dropped from his hands as he fell, clattering to the courtyard below. 10 down, 10 to go. She reached the main building's door, paused to listen, then kicked it open and flowed inside with her rifle tracking. The interior was dim after the brightening dawn outside. 2 fighters were trying to move Hayes toward a back exit. Her arrival had panicked them, made them try to relocate their prize hostage. Nora shot the first fighter, then the second, both dropping before either could bring their weapons to bear on her. Hayes was bound and gagged but conscious, his eyes widening as he recognized her. "Hold still, sir," Nora said, pulling a knife and cutting his bonds. "We're leaving." "Captain Hill, what the hell are you—" "Later. Right now we move." She pulled him toward the door, her rifle still up and scanning. They made it 3 steps into the courtyard before all hell broke loose. The remaining 8 fighters opened fire simultaneously, having finally coordinated a response. Rounds tore through the air, impacted the walls around them, filled the courtyard with the overwhelming noise of automatic weapons fire. Nora shoved Hayes behind cover, returned fire, dropping 1 fighter who'd exposed himself too much. She was burning through ammunition now, controlled bursts at multiple targets, trying to keep them suppressed while finding a way out. 12 down, 8 to go. Her second magazine ran dry. She reloaded while Hayes, now free, grabbed an AK-47 from a dead fighter and began returning fire with practiced competence. "I hope you have an extraction plan, Captain." "Working on it, sir." Another fighter down. Hayes is shooting. 13 total, 7 remaining. Nora identified the pattern of enemy fire, spotted 3 fighters clustered near the compound's main gate. She pulled a fragmentation grenade, cooked it for 2 seconds to prevent them from throwing it back, and lobbed it precisely into their position. The blast eliminated all 3. 16 down, 4 to go. The remaining fighters were breaking, their coordinated defense collapsing into individual survival instincts. One tried to run for a vehicle. Nora shot him. Another attempted to surrender, hands up. She shot him too, because this wasn't about prisoners. This was about getting Hayes out alive, and she couldn't risk leaving active threats behind them. 18 down, 2 to go. The last two fighters had barricaded themselves in a guard shack, firing through windows with the desperate intensity of men who knew they were about to die. Nora and Hayes moved to flank them, working together with the coordination that came from years of training in how to assault fortified positions. Hayes provided suppressive fire while Nora moved. She reached the guard shack's blind side, placed her last breaching charge, detonated it, and both she and Hayes engaged the final two fighters as the wall collapsed. 20 down, 0 remaining. The compound was silent except for the ringing in Nora's ears and the sound of her own breathing. She scanned the area one final time, weapon still up, checking for any threats she'd missed. Nothing moved except smoke from small fires and settling dust. "Clear," she called out. Hayes lowered his weapon, looking at her with an expression that mixed gratitude, disbelief, and probably the beginnings of a lecture about unauthorized operations. "Captain Hill, you just conducted a solo direct action raid on a fortified compound held by 20 enemy fighters." "Yes, sir." "Without authorization. Without support. Without backup." "Yes, sir." "That was either the bravest or most insane thing I've witnessed in 30 years of service." "Probably both, sir." He laughed, the slightly manic sound that came after surviving something that should have killed you. "Let's get the hell out of here before someone decides to send reinforcements." They took one of the technicals, loaded it with weapons and ammunition from the dead fighters, and drove out of the compound as the sun finally broke over the horizon. Nora drove while Hayes contacted friendly forces on a radio they'd recovered, calling in their position and requesting immediate extraction. The pickup point was 10 kilometers away, at a crossroads where American air assets could provide cover. They made it in 15 minutes, driving fast across open desert, scanning constantly for pursuit that never materialized. A pair of Apache helicopters arrived first, circling overhead, their presence ensuring that no enemy forces would dare approach. Then, a Black Hawk for extraction, landing in a cloud of dust and noise. As they climbed aboard, Nora finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion, the adrenaline crash, the reality of what she'd just done. She'd killed 20 enemy fighters in direct combat. She'd rescued a hostage from a fortified compound. She'd conducted an operation that was supposed to require an entire special operations team. And she'd done it all because waiting for authorization would have meant watching someone die. The crew chief handed her a bottle of water as the Black Hawk lifted off. Through the open door, she could see the compound receding into the distance, smoke still rising from the buildings. In a few hours, intelligence analysts would pore over drone footage, counting bodies, assessing battle damage, trying to understand how one operator had accomplished what should have required a full assault team. Hayes sat across from her, his wrists still bearing marks from the restraints, exhaustion and pain evident in his face. But his eyes were clear, alert, already processing what had happened. "You know they're going to hang you for this," he said over the helicopter noise. "Probably, sir. Or give you a medal. Could go either way. I'll take whatever comes. Worth it to get you out." He was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward so she could hear him clearly. 3 years ago, I told you to prove you belonged. Today, you proved you're one of the best officers I've ever served with. Male or female, doesn't matter. What matters is you had the courage to act when action was required, the skill to execute against impossible odds, and the loyalty to risk everything for someone else. That's what makes great soldiers. Nora felt emotion welling up that she'd been suppressing during the action. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet. Thank me after the investigation, the board of inquiry, and whatever career fallout comes from this." "But Nora?" He smiled. "When they ask me if I think you did the right thing, I'm going to tell them you saved my life, and that any commander would be lucky to have you under their command." The formal investigation took 3 days. Nora sat through interviews with everyone from her immediate commander to a 2-star general from Special Operations Command. The questions were predictable. Why did you leave without authorization? Why didn't you wait for properly trained rescue forces? Do you understand how many regulations you violated? Nora's answers were simple and consistent. Colonel Hayes had hours to live at most. Waiting for authorization would have meant watching him die. I had the training, the opportunity, and the capability to act. So I acted. The investigators reviewed every detail. Drone footage showed the entire assault, one operator moving through a fortified compound with precision that looked choreographed. Radio intercepts caught the enemy's growing panic as their defensive positions were systematically eliminated. Physical evidence from the compound confirmed 20 enemy killed in action, 0 civilian casualties, and tactical execution that matched special operations standards. The site commander testified that Nora had acted without orders, without coordination, in direct violation of protocols. But he also admitted that conventional rescue operations would have taken 8 to 12 hours to organize, and intelligence suggested Hayes would have been executed within 4 hours of capture. Hayes himself testified for 2 hours. He described the ambush, his capture, the interrogation that had begun immediately. The enemy had been preparing to film his execution when gunfire erupted outside. He had heard his captors' confusion, their growing fear, the systematic elimination of their security. Then Nora had appeared, moving through that compound like death itself. The enemy never understood what hit them, Hayes told the board. They were facing a Ranger-qualified officer with combat experience, operating alone with nothing to lose. The tactical advantage went to Captain Hill the moment she decided to act, because she understood something they didn't. Sometimes, one soldier with the right training and enough courage is worth more than an entire company that's still waiting for orders. On the third day, the 2-star general conducting the investigation looked at Nora across his desk with an expression she couldn't read. "Captain Hill, what you did was reckless, unauthorized, and violated about 40 different regulations regarding chain of command and operational approval." "Yes, sir." "It was also tactically brilliant, executed with exceptional skill, and resulted in the successful rescue of a senior officer with 0 friendly casualties and 20 confirmed enemy kills." He paused. "I should court-martial you." "Yes, sir. Instead, I'm promoting you to major and transferring you to Special Operations Command. Apparently, we need officers who can think independently and execute impossible missions. You've proven you can do both." "Sir, Don't thank me yet. Your new assignment is with a direct action unit that specializes in exactly this kind of operation. You wanted to prove you could operate at the highest levels? You just got your wish." "And Major Hill?" He leaned forward. "Next time you decide to conduct an unauthorized solo raid, at least leave a more detailed note about where you're going. My heart can't take finding out about these things after the fact." "Understood, sir." "Also, you're being awarded the Silver Star. Classified ceremony, minimal attendance, no press. Your citation will be heavily redacted for operational security, but the award is real, and it's deserved." 2 months later, Major Nora Hill stood in a classified facility receiving briefings on missions that officially didn't exist, working with operators whose names were redacted from official records. She'd proven that she belonged in a world that didn't like accepting women, had shown that gender didn't matter when the mission required courage and skill. The unit she joined was small, elite, composed of operators who'd all proven themselves in similar circumstances. During her first team meeting, the unit commander, a lieutenant colonel with 20 years in special operations, introduced her to the team. "This is Major Hill. Most of you have heard the story by now. She conducted a solo hostage rescue that resulted in 20 enemy killed in action and 1 rescued colonel with no friendly casualties. Some people are calling it the ballsiest operation they've seen in a decade. I call it exactly the kind of thinking we need in this unit." "Welcome aboard, Major." The operators studied her with the particular assessment that special operations soldiers gave to newcomers. They'd all done impossible things, all proven themselves in ways that conventional forces never would. The question in their eyes was simple: can she keep up? Over the next 6 months, Nora answered that question repeatedly. She ran missions in Syria, Iraq, Somalia, places where American forces officially weren't operating, doing things that officially never happened. She proved that her solo raid hadn't been luck or a one-time event, but rather a demonstration of capabilities she'd been developing for years. Her team learned to trust her judgment, her tactical instincts, her willingness to take calculated risks when the mission required it. And more importantly, they learned that gender didn't matter when bullets were flying and decisions needed to be made in seconds. Colonel Hayes attended her Silver Star ceremony in a secure facility that didn't officially exist. After the award, he pulled her aside for a private conversation. "Still can't believe you did that, Nora. 20 fighters, 1 operator, no support. I've worked with Delta, with DevGru, with the best operators in the world. What you did ranks among the most impressive solo operations I've witnessed. Had to, sir. Couldn't let them keep you. That loyalty is going to take you far in special operations. But Nora," he smiled, "try to get authorization next time before you start a one-woman war. The paperwork from your rescue is still circulating through command channels. I think it's going to be studied at staff colleges for the next 20 years as either the perfect example of initiative or the perfect example of what not to do." "Probably both, sir." "Definitely both." He handed her a small box. "The team wanted you to have this. Had it made specially." Inside was a challenge coin, the kind that special operations units created to mark significant events. On one side was an image of a fortified compound with flames and smoke. On the other side, 1 operator, 20 enemies, 0 fucks given, Syria 2024. Nora laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd had since the operation. "This is completely inappropriate, sir. That's why we made it. Keep it. Remember that sometimes the right action is the unauthorized action. Remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite fear. And remember that when everyone else said it couldn't be done, you proved them wrong." She kept that coin in her pocket during every operation after that. A reminder of the day she'd gone alone to extract a hostage, fought through 20 enemies, and proven that sometimes one soldier with the right skills and enough courage could accomplish what an entire army thought impossible. Years later, when Nora Hill retired as a full colonel with more classified commendations than most generals ever received, younger operators would ask her about that night in Syria, about the decision to go alone, about fighting through 20 enemies, about doing what everyone said was impossible. Her answer was always the same. "I didn't think about whether it was possible or impossible. I thought about a good man who needed help and whether I could provide it. Everything else was just execution." That philosophy, focusing on the mission rather than the obstacles, became her legacy in special operations. Officers learned to ask not, "Can this be done?" but "How can I make this happen?" The distinction seemed subtle, but it changed everything. Nora taught that lesson to dozens of young officers over her career. Some of them went on to conduct their own impossible operations, making decisions that looked insane on paper but made perfect sense when American lives were on the line. They called it pulling a hill, the act of going beyond authorization when the situation demanded immediate action. But the real lesson wasn't about breaking rules or conducting unauthorized operations. The real lesson was about understanding when the rule book became an obstacle to doing what was right, about having the moral courage to accept the consequences of your actions when those actions saved lives. On her final day in uniform, Nora stood before a room full of special operations officers, men and women who represented the future of American unconventional warfare. The ceremony was brief, as she'd requested. No long speeches, no elaborate presentations, just a simple recognition of 30 years of service. But before she left, she offered one final piece of advice to the assembled operators. "You'll face moments in your career where the authorized course of action conflicts with the right course of action. When that happens, you have to make a choice. You can follow the rules and live with the consequences of inaction. Or you can do what needs to be done and accept whatever punishment comes. I made my choice in Syria. I'd make the same choice again tomorrow, because at the end of the day, I can live with being reprimanded or court-martialed. What I can't live with is watching good people die because I was too afraid to act." The room was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, every officer in attendance stood and saluted. Not because regulations required it, but because they understood the weight of what she'd said, because they knew that someday they might face the same impossible choice. Hayes was there, now a 2-star general, watching from the back of the room. After the ceremony, he approached her one final time. 30 years, Nora. From lieutenant to colonel. From proving you belong to teaching others what right looks like. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. Couldn't have done it without your mentorship, sir." "Yes, you could have. You proved that the night you came to get me." He smiled. "But I like to think I helped along the way." What's next for you? Private sector? Teaching? Nora looked out the window at the operators conducting training exercises in the distance, young men and women learning the skills they'd need to survive in hostile territories, to make impossible decisions, to do what others couldn't. I'm going to teach, she said finally, not at a university or a private company. I'm going to work with a program that trains foreign military officers in counterterrorism operations, places like Colombia, Philippines, Jordan, countries that need help building their special operations capabilities. Someone needs to pass on the lessons we've learned. Might as well be me. Still can't sit still, can you? Hayes laughed. Still need to be in the fight, even if it's from a different angle. It's what we do, sir. We serve. The uniform changes, the mission changes, but the calling remains the same. They shook hands one final time, mentor and student, colonel and general, two operators who understood that service didn't end when you took off the uniform. It was a lifelong commitment to making the world safer, one mission at a time. The enemy had taken the commander hostage, planning to torture him, execute him, make an example of him. Then Nora Hill went alone to extract him. And 20 enemy fighters learned too late that taking an American officer captive was a death sentence delivered by a woman they never saw coming. One operator, one rifle, 20 enemies eliminated, one hostage extracted. The kind of math that made sense only when you understood that sometimes the right thing to do was exactly the thing you weren't authorized to do. And the kind of courage that inspired generations of operators who learned that the most dangerous person on any battlefield was the one who refused to accept that impossible meant anything other than not yet accomplished. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories every day.